The groan of the deployment crane was a familiar sound, but it did little to soothe the tension coiling in Dr. Alara Vance's stomach. She stood on the deck of the RV Triton, the warm, humid air of the Central Pacific a stark contrast to the frigid world she was about to enter. Below her, cradled in the launch bay, the Orpheus gleamed under the harsh work lights, a perfect white sphere waiting to be swallowed by the impossible blue of the ocean. Final checks are green. Ballast tanks are cycled. The comms link is stable, she recited, more to herself than to the man standing beside her, clutching a data tablet like a shield. Dr. Kenji Tanaka, the mission director, wiped a bead of sweat from his temple. I'm still not comfortable with this, Alara. The board was very specific about the survey transects. This manganese field is our bread and butter for the next 5 years of funding. He tapped the screen of his tablet, showing a neat grid overlaid on a bathymetric map. Then he gestured with his chin towards a far corner of the chart, a vast, featureless blue patch labeled Vance Expanse. You're asking to take our most valuable asset on a 12-hour detour into nothing. It's not nothing, Kenji, Alara said, her voice low but intense. She kept her eyes fixed on the Orpheus. You've seen the data. The long-range magnetometers are screaming. Gravitational lensing that makes no geological sense. It's a sink. Something down there is so dense it's bending space-time, and it's not on any chart. It wasn't on Eris's charts either, Kenji said, his voice softening. He just drew it in with a pen. Alara's jaw tightened. My grandfather was not a lunatic. I never said he was, Kenji countered gently. I liked Eris. He was brilliant. But he got lost chasing shadows. Anomalous biometallic signatures, he called them. The Institute called it professional suicide. This expanse was named after him as a joke, Alara. A cautionary tale for postgrads. I am your friend before I'm your director. I'm asking you not to follow him down that hole. He was ahead of his time, she shot back, finally turning to face him. Her eyes, the same piercing blue as the deep ocean, held a fire that Kenji knew all too well. The equipment he had was a toy compared to this. The Orpheus can withstand pressures he could only theorize about. He saw the ghost in the machine, Kenji. I'm going to see its face. Kenji sighed, the sound lost in the sea breeze. He knew that Look.it was the same obsessive fire he'd seen in her grandfather's eyes years ago. He was defeated. The Institute has authorized a 12-hour discretionary window for equipment calibration. That's all I can give you. Not a minute more. You stick to your comms schedule every hour on the hour. No exceptions. And Alara. Remember what the psych evaluations said. Solo abyssal dives. The pressure doesn't just crush steel. It plays tricks on the mind. The sensory deprivation can make you see things. The only thing I'm going to see is the truth, she said, her voice softening as she placed a hand on his arm. Thank you, Kenji. Before he could reply, she turned and descended the gantry ladder, her boots clanging on the metal steps. A moment later, the circular hatch of the Orpheus swung open with a hydraulic hiss. Alara gave one last look at the world of sun and air before disappearing inside. The hatch sealed with a heavy, final thud, shutting out the world. The clang of the crane, the shouts of the crew, the cry of the gulls, all of it vanished, replaced by the gentle, familiar hum of her sanctuary's life support. She strapped herself into the pilot's chair, her fingers dancing across the consoles, her body and the machine becoming one. The submersible shuddered as the crane lifted it from its cradle and swung it out over the churning water. RV Triton to Orpheus, you are cleared for deployment. Godspeed, Alara. Kenji's voice crackled in her ear, a final tinny link to the surface. Roger that, Triton. See you in a day, she replied, her voice calm and steady. The submersible hit the water with a jarring splash, and for a moment her viewport was a chaos of white foam. Then it submerged and the world turned a brilliant, sun-dappled blue. She initiated the dive and the Orpheus began its long, slow descent. As the light from the surface faded, she flicked a switch on her console, silencing the open voice channel to the Triton. The only connection now was a silent stream of telemetry data. Kenji's voice was gone, the world was gone, she was alone. The descent was more than just a change of location. It was a shedding of identities. Alara Vance, the ambitious scientist, the granddaughter of a disgraced dreamer, the woman haunted by a past she couldn't fully comprehend, was slowly being replaced by something else. Something that resonated with the crushing silence, with the eternal night. Something that was drawn to the impossible. The Orpheus passed through the sunlit epipelagic zone, where schools of fish glittered like scattered jewels and the songs of whales echoed through the water. She saw bioluminescent jellyfish pulsing with ethereal light, their delicate forms a fleeting dance in the blue. Then the light began to fade, the vibrant colors bleeding into shades of twilight. She entered the mesopelagic, the twilight zone, where monstrous-looking fish with oversized eyes and rows of needle-sharp teeth blinked with their own internal light. She saw anglerfish dangling luminous lures, their jaws capable of swallowing prey twice their size. She passed through the bathyal, the midnight zone, where the last vestiges of sunlight were a forgotten dream. Here the only light came from the creatures themselves, a bizarre and beautiful display of living lamps in the crushing darkness. As she descended further, the temperature dropped. The water grew thicker, more viscous, as if the very ocean was resisting her intrusion. The pressure mounted, a silent, invisible force that squeezed the hull of the Orpheus, testing its limits. She could feel it in her bones, a low, constant thrum that vibrated through her teeth. Finally she reached his realm. The abyssal plane. A place of crushing pressure and eternal night, over 20,000 feet below the churning Pacific. Pressure at 9,800 psi and holding, she murmured, her voice a dry rustle in the small cabin. She ran a routine diagnostic, her fingers dancing over the touch-sensitive consoles. Life support green. Hull integrity green. Power reserves green. Everything was nominal. Everything was perfect. Except for the ghost. For the past 72 hours she'd been chasing it. A magnetic anomaly unlike any she'd ever seen. It wasn't the chaotic signature of a volcanic vent or the steady pull of a mineral deposit. It was ordered. Structured. On the long-range scans, it presented as a vast, intricate lattice. A web of magnetic lines so perfectly geometric it made the hair on her arms stand up. It was her grandfather's ghost, the impossible pattern he'd sketched on cocktail napkins and the backs of envelopes. Eris Vance had been a brilliant man, a pioneer in the field of deep-sea geology. But he was also a man consumed. He had dedicated his life to proving the existence of what he called anomalous biometallic signatures in the deepest parts of the ocean. He spoke of impossible structures, of cities built by beings not of this earth. He drew charts filled with strange symbols and geometries, laughed at by his colleagues, dismissed as the ravings of a madman. He died a broken man, his reputation in tatters, his research relegated to the dusty archives of the Institute. Elara had grown up on his stories, had pored over his notes, had felt the sting of his shame as if it were her own. She had inherited his obsession, his unwavering belief in the impossible. She had dedicated her life to vindicating him, to proving that he wasn't crazy, that he had seen something real. Getting closer, she whispered, her heart a quiet drum against her ribs. The external hydrophone began to pick up a sound, a faint rhythmic pulse buried deep beneath the ambient groans of the Earth's crust. Thump thump. Thump thump. A heartbeat. She told herself it was a newly discovered type of hydrothermal vent, a geological quirk. But she didn't believe it. The sub's powerful LED floodlights, capable of turning night into day for 100 yards, seemed to be swallowed by the darkness ahead. It was a phenomenon she'd never encountered. The light didn't reflect, it simply. It was as if the darkness itself was a tangible thing, a living entity that refused to yield its secrets. Diverting auxiliary power to forward lamps, she commanded, her knuckles white as she gripped the controls. The beams intensified and the abyss grudgingly gave up its secret. It wasn't a cave wall or a trench that was absorbing the light. It was a structure. A wall so vast it defied comprehension, built from a material blacker than the abyss itself. It rose from the seafloor, disappearing into the oppressive darkness above. And as the Orpheus drifted closer, she saw it wasn't just a wall. It was the outer boundary of a city. Her breath hitched in her throat. This was it. This was what her grandfather had seen. This was the proof. Awe, cold and sharp, pierced her scientific composure. Before her lay a sprawling geometric metropolis entombed in the deep. Towers that clawed at the darkness, their forms impossibly intricate, impossibly ancient, displaying a grasp of non-Euclidean geometry that made her brain ache. Grand boulevards wide enough to swallow the Orpheus whole, wound between structures that seemed to fold in on themselves. There was no silt on their surfaces, no marine growth, no sign of the patient, relentless decay that should have claimed them eons ago. The city was pristine, as if it had been submerged only yesterday. It was a monument to a dead world, preserved in the sterile, crushing embrace of the deep. The sheer scale of it was overwhelming. It was larger than any city she had ever seen, a testament to the power and sophistication of its builders. And yet it was utterly silent, utterly still. A city of ghosts. With a tremor in her hand, she guided the Orpheus through a grand, arching gateway. The entrance was flanked by two colossal statues, their forms vaguely humanoid but with elongated limbs and heads that resembled polished obsidian. They seemed to stare out into the darkness, their empty eyes forever vigilant. The silence was the most terrifying part. It was a heavy, profound silence, the silence of a tomb. Her sonar scans, which should have painted a detailed 3D map of her surroundings, came back as garbled noise, the city's strange architecture actively defeating the technology. It was as if the city itself was rejecting her presence, refusing to be mapped or understood. She was flying blind, relying only on her eyes and the diminishing reach of her floodlights. She moved slowly, cautiously through the city's deserted streets. The buildings were unlike anything she had ever seen, their surfaces smooth and seamless, their forms defying all known architectural principles. Some were towering spires that pierced the darkness above, their peaks lost in the inky blackness. Others were low, sprawling structures that seemed to meld with the seafloor, their entrances guarded by strange geometric patterns. There were no windows, no doors, no visible means of entry or exit. The city was a sealed, impenetrable labyrinth. She passed through what appeared to be a vast plaza, its center dominated by a massive circular structure that resembled a colossal eye. Its surface was a mirror-like black, reflecting the light of the Orpheus back at her. She felt a strange pull towards it, a sense of being watched, of being judged. That's when she saw the first one. Standing sentinel within a shadowed archway, it was vaguely humanoid in its construction, but with a grace and economy of design that was breathtakingly alien. Its limbs were long and spindly, its body a sleek, polished carapace of the same light-absorbing metal as the city. Its head was a smooth, featureless ovoid, save for a single large, unblinking lens. It was a machine. Robot. It was unlike any robot she had ever seen, its design both elegant and terrifying. It was not clunky or utilitarian. It was a work of art, a masterpiece of engineering. And it was utterly still, a statue in a city of statues. She brought the Orpheus to a halt, the submersible's thrusters gently puffing against the current. The robot was inert, a statue. As she swept her lights through the silent boulevards, she saw more of them. Thousands. Some were frozen in place like the first, guardians at their posts. Others lay in heaps, shattered and broken from some long-forgotten conflict. Many were designed for purposes she could only guess at. Multi-limbed crustacean-like machines near what looked like conduits. Sleek, serpentine constructs coiled around towering spires. Immense, bulky automatons that could only have been laborers. A silent, metal populace in a silent, metal city. She felt a growing sense of unease. The city was not just dead, it was waiting. It was as if the machines were simply dormant, ready to be awakened. For a full hour she drifted, a tourist in a necropolis. A false sense of security began to settle over her. They were dead, all of them. Relics of a civilization that had lost its war against the sea. She maneuvered the Orpheus closer to a smaller, bipedal robot, its form delicate, almost artistic. Its hand was outstretched, its metal fingers poised as if in the middle of a command or a gesture. Emboldened, Elara decided to risk taking a sample. She told herself it was purely for scientific purposes, to analyze the composition of the metal, to learn something about the lost civilization. But deep down she knew it was something more. It was a need to touch, to connect, to break the silence. Engaging manipulator arm, she said, her voice steady now. The heavy, articulated arm of the Orpheus unfolded from its recess, its multi-jointed fingers flexing in the floodlights. She guided it slowly, carefully towards the inert robot's outstretched hand, intending to scrape a microscopic sample of its alloy. The moment the manipulator's claw was a foot away from the robot's fingers, it happened. A flicker. From the single unblinking lens of the sentinel in the distant archway, a low cobalt blue light emanated. It wasn't a glow. It was an awakening. The light pulsed once, twice. Then a pencil-thin beam of pure information lanced through the gloom, slicing through the cockpit of the Orpheus. Elara flinched back, throwing an arm over her face as if to block it. The light felt invasive. It felt like a physical touch, a cold, digital finger tracing her form, analyzing her soft tissues, her skeleton, the technology surrounding her. On the main console, a string of untranslatable code scrolled across the screen, burning itself into the display before vanishing. It was a message she knew, a greeting or perhaps a warning. The head of the sentinel swiveled. Its movements were not stiff or jerky, but unervingly fluid, a silent, gliding motion that defied the immense pressure and the passage of ages. It took a step forward, planting its three-toed foot in the silt with eerie silence. The sound was almost imperceptible, a faint click that resonated not in her ears but in her very bones. Before Elara could even process what she was seeing, the robot she had been approaching, the delicate, artistic one, moved. Its fingers, which had been poised for millennia, closed into a fist. Its head, also a single lens, snapped towards the Orpheus, its own cobalt light flaring to life. It was no longer a statue, it was a hunter. A discordant screech, a burst of digital static, erupted from the submersible's comms system. The proximity alert didn't just chime, it shrieked as if in agony. Simultaneously, a sickening crunch of metal on metal reverberated through the hull from her blind spot. She was thrown against her restraints. Alarms blared from the blackness of a side alley, a massive, pincer-like claw, belonging to one of the crustacean-like machines she'd dismissed as laborers, had shot out, puncturing the plasteel of the sub's portside thruster housing. The sound was surgical, a sound of intentional, crippling damage. It was not a random awakening. It was a coordinated response. The hydrophone, which had been silent, now screamed. The low, rhythmic pulse she had heard before was now a chorus, a city-wide hum that vibrated through the water, through the very frame of the Orpheus, a resonant call that shook her teeth. The city was coming alive. From the Stygian blackness of countless doorways and shadowed spires, hundreds, then thousands of cobalt and crimson lights blinked open. The dead city was a sleeping immune system, and it had just recognized a foreign cell. They converged from all sides. The metal denizens of the abyss moved upon her. They flowed through the streets not with the chaos of a mob, but with the chilling, synchronized grace of a hive mind. The wardens, the immense crab-like machines, emerged from the shadows, their heavy footfalls now audible thuds against the hull. The sleek, humanoid sentinels glided through the water, their movements impossibly fast.